Welcome back. First thing, I already had this video recorded, but it got corrupted. It wouldn't work. I couldn't edit it, so I have to redo it now. And yes, I'm aware first games are day one of the playoffs already passed, so we have the next 4 games. But I want to talk about the Celtics-Nets matchup because I think this is going to be the most exciting series. Even though the Grizzlies-Timberwolves is really exciting, and we kind of thought that the Sixers-Raptors was going to be. We obviously know now that it was a blowout. The Celtics had a really mediocre start. We were thinking they're going to be a play-in team. They're not going to make the playoffs, and they're struggling. This is a disappointing season. And then with around 50 games passed, they turned it on and they never looked back. They became the best defense, and those chemistry issues and the head coach issues that we had seen and talked about basically ceased to exist at that point. The Nets journey, they had expectations to be a championship favorite. They were a contender. They still had the big three: Harden, Kyrie, KD. They started off really hot. They were doing really, really well, and then their injury happened, and the whole drama with Harden wanting out and getting traded to Philly, and then Kyrie not being able to play, and then him coming back for road games, and then eventually being able to play at home games with the mandate being lifted in New York. And the whole idea of striking fear into a lot of people, even though that they were the 1 seed for a while, but they ended up as the 8 seed because of the play-in. People are saying that or the 7 seed rather, they're the most dangerous 7 seed of like all time, essentially. They're matching up in back-to-back years. The reason why I think that matters, that they switch seeds, is because of the home environments. I think the Celtics are going to heavily benefit from having those 2 first home games, and having the home court advantage is going to be really huge in this series. I think the xFactors for both teams, for the Celtics, it's going to be head coach Ime Udoka. I think him being in the playoffs for the first time with these expectations to move forward as a top seed is going to be really important, in the way that he goes against Steve Nash is going to be critical. And then I think the bench and the experience are going to be that little bit of a push that if the Nets want to advance to the second round, they're going to need. If they don't have that, it's going to be really tough for them to win a team in the East, I would say. Let's look at the regular season matchups between the two teams. In the regular season, Boston took 3 of the 4 matchups, and a lot of them were in pretty convincing fashion. I would say all but 1 game was in convincing fashion. But you can look at that with a grain of salt because of injury and availability. Kyrie only played in 1 game, and that was the March 6th matchup, the last matchup of the season, or the regular season rather. And KD and Kyrie played in that game. It was one of the first home games that Kyrie could play in Boston. Or was it in Boston? Maybe I'm forgetting. Regardless, it was like a 6-point loss, or it was a fairly close game. But that was the only good close game in that entire 4-game series. Harden only played in that first matchup in November, and I believe that they won that. They won pretty decisively. I think they won by 23 points. That's when the Celtics were still really, really mediocre at that point in time. And then the first 3 games in the entire series were all pretty much blowouts. The Celtics struggled in that first matchup. Celtics had basically no identity. Smart led in points with 20, and Schroeder led in minutes played at 36 off the bench, which was not ideal to win NBA basketball games, considering he went from being someone who was hoping to get $80 million and had to settle for 3.4, which is really sad. The Celtics were just barely over 500. The February 8th matchup, that's when they had started their stride, or I wouldn't say start their stride, but they were in that early stages of their stride, becoming really good. And the Nets obviously had started to skip pretty bad because of losing KD. The caveat between the two teams is they're at their best right now. The Nets are playing unreal good. They look like they can, run through the East if they really wanted to, but that comes at a cost, because head coach Steve Nash has already talked about and has been very open with the fact that KD and Kyrie are going to have to play 40 plus minutes a game if they're going to want to compete, and if they're going to want to win at all, especially against really good teams. And if they were to beat the Celtics, which is already enough of a challenge, then they would have to match up against most likely Milwaukee in the second round again. It's going to be really difficult for that, because we know that there's some injury history between the two. Obviously, KD's getting older. He still looks amazing. He still plays at a great level, but those minutes are going to take a toll on him more than they would, years ago. And then Kyrie's still fasting, so if they have an earlier game, it might be a little rough, but then again, he's put up 40 points when he's fasting, so maybe that doesn't even matter at all. As for the Celtics, when they flipped their switch And when they really started to take over defensively, they became one of the best teams in like NBA history in terms of defensively speaking. They have like the best defensive player who's currently injured right now, and Robert Williams, who might make a comeback as early as Game 5 or Game 6, but we still don't know. Coach Udoka and Brad Stevens has said that they don't want him to come back unless he feels like 100% ready to be okay with coming back. So that's where they're at. And they still have a Defensive Player of the Year candidate in Marcus Smart. We know that he's gotten a lot of votes so far from people in the media. So that helps them out a lot. This is my prediction for the matchup between the Celtics and the Nets. I think I have the Nets in 6, losing to the Celtics. I think the Celtics are legit and they are contenders. I think this will be the most competitive 6-game series in recent memory. I think that Tatum surges, Udoka will outduel Steve Nash because Steve Nash is going to be really limited in his options and basically having to play like KD and Kyrie almost the entire game except for maybe a minute or two in each quarter. I think KD and Kyrie will as much as they can for their team, but they're ultimately going to fall short. And like I said, in a really competitive series. I think the Celtics having home court advantage, like I said earlier, is going to be like a really, really, really important factor. Having those two first home games to set the tone in the TD Garden is going to matter an absolute ton. I think it's going to be really special to have more home games in Boston than in Brooklyn. Boston faithful is going to come out and they're going to really support their team because they've went through it all this year. Having to go from a team that was maybe sniffing the play-in to being actual contender in the East is a really big deal. I think the person that I've neglected to mention so far for the Celtics that's going to be like their on-court X factor and not their off-court X factor, like the head coach, I think it's going to be Al Horford. Al Horford has the experience. He's been in really tough series before. He's made it to the conference finals. I think him being able to anchor the defense and kind of be that veteran leader, even though someone like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have been in the playoffs several times and been to the conference finals twice now, I think he's going to be the one that's going to excel and to hunker down the defense, especially with Robert Williams being out. For the Nets, as great as the top end talent is, like I said before, they're going to really struggle having to play KD and Kyrie essentially the entire time. 41, 42, 43 minutes a game is going to take a really big toll on them. They're young players like Claxton and Bruce Brown kind of emerging as role players is going to help in this series, but I think their age with their experience is going to be really difficult. Obviously, they have Dragic, they have Curry, they have Patty Mills, which is going to help significantly. People who can handle the ball, good free throw shooters, good shooters in general. They make good decisions. They play pretty solid defense. They've been on good teams before, so they understand what it takes to be a contender in the playoffs. But I think with their age and I think with their limited chemistry of having to not play with each other a whole lot throughout the season, whether it be missing games, injury, getting traded, I think things like that are going to take a toll on their ability to produce chemistry wise. And I think having someone like Kessler and Cam Johnson, having rookies and young guys I don't know if they're even going to be in the rotation since they are pretty young. In the play-in game, they played a little bit, but even so, having to rely on really, really young guys like that, even though Claxton is in his second year, maybe his third, I think it's his second year. But having to rely on young guys like that in the playoffs is going to be really tough, especially against people who are going to attack them, who's going to make them work, who's going to like pinpoint them on offense, and they're going to single them out on defense. It's going to be really tough for them. But again, who knows? They have KD, they have Kyrie, they can make anything happen. And like I said, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun matchup. So we'll see. Anyways, what do you think? Sorry for the late video. Is this a good take or is it a bad take? Let me know what you think. Stick around for more NBA content. I'm going to try and put out as many videos as I can. I know I'm a little bit behind the curve, but hey, I'm trying to make it work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Oh, shit. Wait. Well, I just remembered Ben Simmons might come back, so fuck it. Nets in 7.